Allied tower destroyed. An enemy has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Kill Switch here, bringing you another Teacher Tuesday episode. This time, I'm going to be going into a little support play here. Let's jump into it.
Do you want to fight?
So, on this episode, I'm actually going to cover Narbash, and we'll do a kit overview and a general build guide. With support, there's kind of a couple of ways you can build, especially with Narbash because he scales so well with things. So I'll kind of give you like a broad spectrum. I'll give you what I do, and then I'll give you kind of like some other potential options as well. But starting off, I'll cover just briefly here, cover the base stats, pretty standard stuff. Doesn't make a ton of difference, like seeing these numbers and like scalings and stuff. It doesn't really like give you a huge, idea into like how the character works or anything. Just gives you like at a glance, like basically level 1, no items, this is what you get. So without further ado, let's jump into the abilities here. So his first ability here, that's going to be his Q. That's going to be his March. So that is going to be the movement speed ability. You'll see there, grants all nearby allies 35, 40, 45, 50, and 55% at max level, decaying movement speed for 3 seconds. So that's a good ability. And it's also pretty general use too. You can use it to help get into a fight. You can help your ADC kill secure. You can help, teammates get to a fight, whatever it may be. And you can also use it as an escape, right? So you can use it to help your ADC get out, or you can use it to help yourself get out if absolutely necessary. Just kind of depends. Really good general use ability. Doesn't cost a ton of mana either. And it has a pretty good radius on it too. So like just because you're not right next to somebody doesn't mean that they won't get that movement speed bonus. So really good ability. Really good for situations. You'll probably be using this a lot, especially like during team fights or before team fights to get there, after team fights to kill secure, whatever it may be. So his next ability, Song of My People. So that's going to be his healing pulse ability. So heal yourself and nearby allies for, it says 0,000 health every 0.5 seconds. That's not really indicative. Down here you'll see 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 at max level. And then it does scale off of energy power. So basically what that's saying is every half a second, or if you really want to, every second you're going to heal for 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. That is increased with energy power scaling. So any energy power items you build is going to increase that amount. Now do notice it does say cancels from any form of hard CC. So if you have that running and you get hit with a stun or any type of hard CC, it will stop, which is something to keep in mind because in team fights you'll usually have this running, at least for a good majority of it. If somebody comes in and hits you with a stun, remember to turn that back on, because it does come in handy, especially later game. That healing is pretty big. I mean, especially for like your ADC or your like caster, they're not going to have a ton of health. So that 50 healing plus whatever energy power you have built is going to help a lot. So keep that in mind. Next ability here is his ultimate, Crash Bang Boom. Channel a deafening flurry of drum strikes, applying a 50-50-50% slow and dealing 300, 450, 600 at max level damage over 3 seconds. Knock up enemy units at the end of the channel. So this ability is really good. I think the only drawback to it is the channel time is a little long, but that's rightfully so for the ability, because you're getting slow, you're dealing damage, and you're getting a knockup at the end. So it's good to keep in mind that this is a 3-second channel, right? Because you could be hit with CC during any of that 3 seconds, and that will stop your ultimate. So it's always good to know the enemy team comp, and it's always good as a Narbash to watch what abilities have been used. I've played a lot of Narbash recently and seen enemies will come in, they will approach you differently. They'll kind of wait out that Narbash ult, and then they'll stun you as soon as the second you go to use it. They will stun you for it. So even something as simple as a Chimera ult can stop you out of that. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, this does scale with energy power as well, and so that 600 damage can easily turn into, 1,000 damage, or whatever it may be. Depends on how much energy power you build. You could be doing quite a bit of damage with this as well. And I've actually run into situations where I've accidentally taken an easy kill from somebody because I was using this. I mean, it's just unavoidable, but that's one thing to remember, is that if you know it's a kill secure after you've started this ult, back up and let your team finish it off. Get out of that range of your ultimate so your team can finish that kill off, because that's the last thing you want to do as a support, is take kills away from your teammates. So, but otherwise, really good ult. The mana cost is a little high, so that's something to keep in mind. Your cooldown is relatively high, but that's honestly not that bad, especially when you're building some cooldown reduction. That's pretty typical right there, I would say. Usually by end game, with all the cooldown reduction that you have, this will be down to about 45 seconds or so, give or take. Don't quote me on that number, but overall it'll feel good. You won't even notice it's gone. You'll look and say, oh, it's back, cool. So really good ability, just something to keep in mind. That 3-second channeling, that's really the only downside. So that's really the only thing that you really got to worry about is, hey, am I in the right position to use this? Did the Steel already come in and use all of his abilities? Did the Chimera already use his ult? Did the Bellica already use her knockup, etc., etc., those type of things. Next here we got his auto attack, his melee attack. I mean, this is pretty basic for everybody. A little bit different damage scalings in that, but overall, pretty basic. You're never going to really worry about the auto attack for Narbash. Maybe if you run him in, a different role, off-lane role or something like that. But I've seen it. It doesn't... it works usually with lower, little to no CC teams. This can work pretty well with Narbash off-lane, but you won't see it too often. It's kind of more of a having fun pick, or just because you're tired of all the other off-laners type of thing. But yeah, nothing too crazy about this. Nothing you need to know or anything. His next ability, his right mouse button, that would be his Thunk. So that is his hard CC, single target, low cooldown ability. He throws out his drumstick, deals 70, 110, 150, 190, 230 at max level damage, and that is energy damage, and stuns the first target hit for 1.2, 1.35, 1.5, 1.65, and 1.8 seconds at max level. So that's really good. That's this is a good, like, probably like his bread and butter. If you can hit this, it's a skill shot in a way. I mean, it does have a hitbox, probably a little bit of a big hitbox. It's easier to hit than maybe like a Richter hook or something like that, or a Decker orb. But overall, I mean, still a skill shot. You have to at least be somewhat skilled to hit this. But if you can hit these consistently and pair it with, you know, like a movement speed to boost your ADC in, or pair it with a ultimate to get the slow and the knock up on like duo lane both, like the support, maybe the Decker's already used her stun or something, so you know you can go in with this right mouse button, hit him, and then ult immediately so that you're going to get that full ult off. But really good ability, good stun, deals a decent amount of damage. It also scales with the energy power, so I mean, again, if you're building energy power, this is going to increase the damage. The cooldown on it is not too bad, especially, again, if you're building cooldown reduction. You know, you've got 12, 11.5, 11, 10.5, 10. With cooldown reduction, that's going to be more like 6 at max level, maybe even less, depending on how much CDR you build. And the mana cost is 90 at every level. So, I mean, it is kind of high, but generally the mana cost on hard CC single target abilities is a little bit high just because it's so useful. The same could be said about like Decker's stun orb. I mean, Decker's stun orb can hit multiple enemies. I do think it is higher, if I remember correctly.
How about it?
Let's see. Mana cost at higher level, yeah, it is. So it's a little bit higher, but nothing too crazy. Yeah, overall, really good ability, and this is kind of your bread and butter. This is like, if you can hit this, usually your teammate's gonna know, like your ADC's gonna know, like, hey, that's a good chance to go in right there. That's a stun. I'm going in. So onto his passive here. So his passive, Drummer's Resolve, is gain 0.4, 0.4, 0.4, 0.4, 0.4 mana regen per 100 points of missing mana. So basically that's giving you just passive mana regen, right? And so it may not seem like much, 0.40 per 100 points of missing mana, but it's pretty big, especially when you're playing like a mana intensive hero like Narbash can be, with, you know, proccing that healing. Because if you leave that healing on for a long time, you'll notice your mana is going to be hurting. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that just because you're low on mana doesn't mean you're going to be low on mana. You can disengage from a fight, or if you secure kills, you can go off and do other things and still be able to regenerate enough mana to do something later on as well. Like, you don't have to immediately back to get more mana or whatever. But that's going to be situational, of course. I mean, if you run into where you have, you know, 2,500 gold to spend or something, that's a different story, but something to keep in mind. And this pairs well with the magician aspect as well. And I'll get into that here in a little bit with the build and the aspects and the items and stuff. But this will also like boost with magician, you know, how much mana you're getting back. Because magician, I believe, gives you 25% of missing mana or something like that. I'm not sure. I'll have to look at it whenever we get to the next part. But really good pair with that. And especially if you start building like mana items earlier on, which generally supports kind of their first couple cards will be some type of mana boost. So this will help with that as well. But yeah, that's kind of his kit in general. He's a really good support. He's one of my favorite supports to run. His only downside is he does fall off a little bit in the CC teams. Just because all of his abilities can essentially be shut down with hard crowd control. So like a steal support really can mess with a Narbash. Most of the time he'll just wait for you to use to start your ult, and then he'll stun you in it. You can play around it. You can bait out steal abilities. You can use it to your advantage, but that's kind of a higher skill level thing where you have to know exactly like when and where. You almost have to wait for a jungle gank or something so that you can bait out all of Steel's abilities, and then, you know, jungler comes in and cleans up type of thing. But overall, lower CC teams, he's a really good pick. The healing alone is great, especially early game. It can help your ADC out pretty tremendously in the thunk. So just keep that in mind. And so another thing to keep in mind with Narbash as well, and kind of like supports in general, and honestly every hero in general, but I'll just kind of cover supports for this video, but the order in which you buy your abilities too. So there's always going to be kind of like a set order or a preferred order of abilities which you want to focus earlier on. With Narbash and most supports, you're going to want to buy the stun, the hard CC ability first, just for that early game cushion. And that's the same with Narbash. You want to buy the thunk first. The second ability you'll want to buy is your healing, and you'll get that pretty quickly, and it's good to have on hand, although early game with the mana pool that you have, it's going to cost you a lot more, so you got to kind of be scarce with it. And then third, your march, your movement speed ability. And then I typically put most of my points, like early points, into the healing, just because it does increase its effectiveness. As you gain mana as well, you'll be able to use it more frequently. You'll be able to leave it turned on for longer periods. So you kind of want that. That's like the biggest, like, you know, you can always have that on. You can always be helping the team. So that's the ability I kind of focus the most up until ult. Once you hit level 6, you get the ult. You know, now you're in a pretty good spot. So, but it's kind of up to you as well. I mean, what you prefer, your play style, etc. You may want to focus something else a little earlier. That's totally fine. I'm just telling you kind of what I typically do. But most supports will, like I said, buy that hard stun first and then go into their utility. But let's go ahead and get into the build guide here a little bit for Narbash. And I'll start with the aspects here. The aspects that usually work the best for Narbash, I think most of the time you're going to want Magician for that mana return. That's always nice to have on a mana intensive hero like Narbash. Other aspects you'd want to use, I've found that Templar or Rook typically work the best. I know other people that play support swear by like Clairvoyant and Bishop and stuff like that too. Perfectly fine. I just prefer the Templar, getting that shielding with your mana spent, and then also giving your teammates your armor or some of your armor. I find that to be pretty good because that's just something like that's always gonna, you know, you're always gonna be doing that. It's like a constant buff as opposed to something that you have to like remember to do or whatever. So that's usually what I run. I'd say most of my games is Magician and Templar. If I'm going up against a more crowd control based team, maybe Magician and Rook. But those are the main ones you'll see, at least for Narbash support anyway. But as far as items go, right, so let's get into the items here. The starting items that you're going to use are going to be your shiny bangle, and you can either buy 2 small health potions, or what I would recommend buying the Sentry Ward. Reason for that is because it's always nice to be able to put this sentry ward at the very beginning of the game in whatever jungle side your duo lane is on. So, and you'll put that in your own jungle so that you'll know if someone's coming in to your jungle, your side of the jungle, trying to come in for like a gank behind you, trying to come in on your jungler if they're in there, or just coming in there. So it's basically just free vision, right? So if somebody's where they're not supposed to be, you'll have eyes. That's what I do. Not saying you have to do that, because it does help out sometimes to have that small health potion there, especially early game. Kind of a personal preference, but I would say give the sentry ward a shot. I think it would come in handy quite a bit, but situational, and it's up to you. So, and then other than that, you can always buy the rad pulse as well. So you'll be given the stealth emblem automatically, which I kind of go back and forth on, because I do like having double wards available to me, even though these cancel each other out, right? So this is, you put this down, it's a ward, and then you put this down, it will destroy this ward. But with so many rad pulses being played now, sometimes it's just nice to have a ward always available to you to place. Is it nice to be able to de-ward? Sure, absolutely. But more importantly, I think you want to have those wards on you. Sure, your ADC will have a ward, but that's one every, however 200 whatever seconds, you got to wait for cooldown. So it's just something I do. I kind of go back and forth. I don't think there's a right answer to it. I think it's just what you prefer. I prefer to have vision, so that's just me. That's typically what I'll go with, but completely up to you. Now, after the starting kit here, with Narbash, the first card that I usually buy, and this goes for most supports as well, is I will actually buy my boots first, and I will buy the boots of haste specifically. And the reason for that is because you get the full movement speed bonus, you get 10 cooldown reduction, and you get 250 mana. And that's just at the cost of 1,000 gold. So that early on for a support is huge. Those are all things that you need. This role is the only role that I rush my boots and build them first. I think that it's very helpful, and I think that it's all the rest of the boots, like, I'm not saying they're bad items, but this gives you an automatic boost to your performance as a support. So these I build first. Now with Narbash, after I finish my boots, the very first card I build and the card that I rush and the card that everyone should rush as a Narbash is Siren's Call. So Siren's Call is a wonderful card built almost perfectly for a Narbash. It's going to give you that energy power, it's going to give you that cooldown reduction, and it's going to give you a pretty good chunk of mana. And on top of that, these passives, outgoing heals and shields are increased by 20%, so that's automatically going to make your song of the song of your people better and stronger. And 10% of remaining shields are converted into health after the shield expires, which won't mean anything right now because Narbash doesn't have any shielding abilities, but after you build this item, the next item you should go into, and this is a really good support specific card, is Blessing of the Divine, or BOT-D as it's shortened into. But this is also a really good card for any support in general. What it does is it gives you 45 physical and 45 energy armor, which is a pretty good amount of both of those. So that's nothing to laugh about. And it gives you an active where you shield all nearby allies within 800 units for 100 plus 15 per hero level, plus 20% of your bonus health. Shields lasts for 3 seconds. Any ally who has had this effect used within the last 30 seconds will have the shield be 20% effective. So this is where that other passive on Siren's Call comes in, because this will also, whatever's left over of that shield will heal them as well. So kind of a good combo. This item right here is used by, I would say 90% of supports run this, along with Robe of Miracles, which, if this is kind of going to be one of those situational cards, just because, so what Robe of Miracles does is it kind of essentially does the same thing as Blessing of the Divine, except for it heals instead of gives that overshield. Well, you could argue that that's a little redundant with Narbash just because he has healing, or you could argue that that's even better because now you have a instant heal for X amount and it's increased by Siren's Call. So I'm not going to say that I run this every game, but there are games where I will get this right after the Blessings of the Divine. It just kind of depends, right? Pretty situational. If I feel like I'm doing pretty well, but my ADC's still dying too much, like, I might go into this card. But that's, like I said, kind of one of those, maybe I build it, maybe I don't type of cards. So the cards that I for sure know I'm going to build in most of my games as Narbash are, like I said, Siren's Call, Blessing of the Divine, and then I almost always go Knight's Battle Plate as well. Reason for that is just for the extra bulkiness, right? So the extra armor, the extra cooldown, and then it also has an active of gaining a shield, which will be buffed by Siren's Call as well. Gain a decaying shield equal to 100 plus 20% maximum health per nearby enemy hero for the next 3 seconds. During this time, your own damage output is reduced by 75%. Not a big deal for a support. Also has a passive for every nearby enemy hero within 1200 units, gain 8 energy armor and 8 physical armor. So basically all you're doing is assuring that you're going to stay alive long enough to be able to keep your heals going, to keep yourself in the fight, to keep thunking people, and then hopefully keep giving yourself opportunities to get that ultimate off. So I love this card. I think it's really good for supports, even frontliners, but I almost think this is a better card for supports, just because it gives you bulkiness, but with a useful active and a useful passive for you. So another card that I like to build on Narbash is the Fountain of Invigoration. This is a situational card as well. This is kind of more like an offensive type of build, or a trying to keep yourself alive build. It doesn't necessarily work the greatest for utility, like for your team, so you could argue maybe not use that. That's just kind of up to you. I like the card in general. I know you've heard me talk about this card with Kwong, and I'll eventually probably go over it again with Chimera when I do a Chimera video and all that stuff, but I do like the card in general. It's possibly situationally good on Narbash, just kind of depends, but figured I'd throw it in there for you. Some other cards that you can do the Rad Poise. That's the stasis card that gives you some energy power, a little bit of armor on both sides, and then that stasis, that's kind of like, that may be situational as well. That can slow down a really fed like assassin jungler. It can slow down like a really fed anybody really. But that's a situational card. It does give some pretty good stats, so, and it's pretty cheap, definitely worth mentioning. If you want to be really aggressive, you could always go into what's the name of it? Where is it? Telepath's Trinket? No, Traveler's Augment. That's another movement speed boost. I mean, that's just kind of like icing on the cake. Since Narbash already has the movement speed bonus, but it does give you 20 CDR, some energy power, and some health. I mean, these are just all good utility cards. Then you gain 10 item cooldown reduction. That's always a good thing. That'll speed up the time of your Blessings of the Divine, your Robe of Miracles, you know, those type of items. You could go into Telepath's Trinket, where you apply a movement speed pull to an enemy. So, you know, you got an enemy that's trying to escape. You can use this on them. It'll kind of not pull them towards you, but it'll like cause like a gravity effect where they kind of are slowly like being pulled in your direction type of thing. Again, that could be a situational thing. As well as like Purity of the Ancients you could do too. This one isn't used as much, mainly because like the build path in it is strange, and the stats that it gives is kind of like, it doesn't give you any health or mana or anything, but it does give you that cleanse active, right? Cleansing of any kind of stun or root or anything like that. That's kind of nice to have, but it's really like it's situational, because I find that most of the time when I have this card, I forget to use it. I'll have it in there. I'll be like, all right, perfect. I'm ready for a stun. I'm ready for a steal, whatever. And I have this, but I forget to use it. So just throwing that one out there. It's a solid enough card and it's cheap, but personally, like 50-50 on it. Sometimes I might use it, sometimes not. Some other good ones you can do is, and this is kind of in general too, but you can always run like a Baleful Armor or a Blighted Chestplate or a Thorn Shield or something like that, just to give yourself a little extra tankiness and also be passively dealing damage as well. Like, you know, with Narbash, you know, he does kind of scale a little bit on the tanky side as well. Like he does perform well with tanky cards, so like you could always go that route. Like you could hit your bot D and your Siren's Call and then immediately just build like you were building a tank, and it would work out pretty well. I would say though, one thing you might look into is trying to find some items with some CDR just to help out with the support cause. I think Cataphract has 25 cooldown, Aegis Cataphract. It's not the greatest card, but it is a good tangy card for a support, because it does have support like passives and stuff. So I mean, just kind of depends on like the route you want to go with him. If you want to go into the full-on like support with the robe, the Blessings of the Divine, the Siren's Call, you know, the Telepath's Trinket, whatever, you know, that's a solid build. You can go into the tanky build with the Knight's Battle Plate, the Cataphract. Really just kind of depends. I mean, it could be situational too. Like you could see that your team is short on frontliners. That this could put you at the front lines. So all situational, and most of my builds are. You'll hear me say it all the time, situational, because that's what the game is. The game is a lot of situational awareness and gameplay. So some honorable mention cards or items are like Substitution, which honestly you probably could make more of an argument that this could be in the normal rotation as well. I don't run it a ton. I don't, for some reason, don't see it as useful unless you build it first. Like I feel like you'll get the most out of this earlier in the game when the damage output isn't so high, because what you're doing is you're transferring 15% of the damage taken when you link your ally to you. You're transferring 15% of it to you, which earlier on it can be a little bit bigger, but later in the game, 15% damage isn't a lot, for especially if it's your ADC, right? I mean, if someone's blowing up your ADC, they're gonna blow up your ADC. Like the 15% damage reduction isn't gonna do a ton for that. So that's just something to keep in mind with that one. Some more honorable mentions though, like you could run like Nirvana Jewel, I guess. Again, it's a stasis item. It does give you some CDR and some physical armor and some energy power. That'll help with your heals and stuff, and like your thunk and your damage output, your cooldown reduction. Give you a little bit of physical armor, so I mean it's a solid card. The stasis could help situationally. It's just kind of depends. But like other than that, I mean, you could like run a safeguard amulet, but that's just kind of protecting you. That's not really doing anything for your team. And as a support, that's kind of your job, is like you really just want to have like most of your items do something for your team, right? Like helpful in some way, shape, or form. Even with cards like Baleful, like you're at least dealing damage in an area around you, and it's giving you tankiness. Like it's at least somewhat helping your team out. Same with like Blighted Chestplate. You're anytime you're getting hit, you're applying trauma. So I mean, like that's at least helping your team out. So that's kind of what I go off of when I'm building, is just like, how is this going to help my team out? Sometimes helping yourself can help your team out, but you know, it's kind of a toss up. Like, you know, what do I do here? And that's kind of why I'm just kind of giving you some general ideas of like what you could do in what situations, and what items work and how they work and how they would help the team and so on and so forth. So, but that's pretty much gonna wrap up the build here. I think we covered just about all the items that could be useful. So that'll probably wrap up the video here. Again, I thank you guys for all the support and the likes and the new subscribers and everything. Keep checking in. I'll be doing one of these every Tuesday. If you have some requests, or if you just like the video, you like the stuff, let me know. What heroes you want to see next, or whatever, you know, let me know. If you don't like the video, again, I am open to feedback. If I missed something here, throw it down in the comments, because this isn't like a flex on like, hey, I'm so good at the game, I'm gonna tell everybody how to play. This isn't what this is. This is to help some of the newer players, or like if you're new to a hero, this is kind of like gonna get you started. So if I missed something here, or if you've got some info on the hero, put it down in the comments. Let me know. You know, let's help each other out. You know, that's the last thing we want, is to promote more toxicity, right? So again, thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Stay tuned. There'll be more coming. Thanks.